Welcome to Popcorn Planet. I am Andy Signore. We've been awaiting the news, and it's been 13 hours. And apparently they've reached a verdict on 4 of the 5 charges. The one charge they are holding out on is count 1, the racketeering one that everybody has always said, did they do a good enough job on that? They seem to have found a verdict on all other of the 5 charges, but there are jurors on both sides holding out. They are unable to budge on this. Chris, I want to go straight to you. What do you, as a lawyer who's dealt with these types of things, in your mind, knowing that they've agreed on counts 2 through 5, are holding out on 1, what does that tell your legal brain? What do you think's happening in that jury room?
Well, this is really bad for Diddy because the racketeering charge is really a collection of other crimes to make it a racketeering. So if the jury were finding not guilty on these other charges, I think it definitely would have then come to a conclusion that the racketeering would be a not guilty. So that's kind of my sense is that there's consensus among the jury, unanimously to saying, hey, we're going to find him guilty potentially of these other charges, but the RICO is just too far to go and they're deadlocked, meaning they cannot come up with a unanimous decision on that. And now they're fighting over whether they're going to charge the jury with this so-called Allen instruction to come back into court for the judge to saying, look, this is really important. You come up to a unanimous decision. No one should change their conviction here, their honest, impression on what should happen. But it's really, really important that you come up with a unanimous decision and send them back. That could be really coercive to some of these holdout jurors to maybe change their vote from not guilty to guilty, and that's why the defense doesn't want that. So he can, if he's found guilty on 2, 3, 4, and 5, he's still serving a good chunk of time, correct? Absolutely. There is substantial prison exposure to those other charges, and so that would be a very, very long time. And the sentencing guidelines in federal court are very complex. So not necessarily all convictions are run, consecutively. Many times it's concurrently, meaning that if you're convicted of multiple counts, they don't just say, oh, that's 3 years for count 1, serve that. Then you start serving 5 years on count 2. They many times will have those done concurrently, but this could be a substantial prison sentence for him. The one thing he has going for him is he has no criminal history that I'm aware of.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Like, what? Because they're talking here minimums, maximums. The first count is the highest penalty, which would be a maximum life sentence. But do you suspect who picks how long? Is it the judge? Who decides how much time per count that they receive?
Sure. So the jury determines whether somebody's guilty or not guilty, or if there's a hung jury. The judge does the sentencing. Back in the old days, the judge had latitude on sentence, but now that's very strict. So there's sentencing guidelines, there's minimums, and so the judge has to follow whatever the law requires for the conviction under that count. And then if there's any latitude, then they can select among a range of options. So again, and I looked and attempted to kind of calculate this. It is super, super complex, and it may depend on some of the enhancements here that he gets hit with. But I got to think it's going to be many, many years in prison. And then, like I say, he does have no criminal history, so that's going for him. And so, but so if he escapes a conviction on RICO and he's not recharged on the RICO, which I think would be highly unlikely if it's a hung jury, he's still going to be in prison for a very long time.
Kim, do you have any questions for Mr. Melcher?
Is there any chance when you look at this that you're hearing that they've decided on 2, 3, 4, 5 that what they're saying is not guilty on all 4 of those?
That would be really unusual for me. Jurors sometimes will do, some weird things or maybe not understand the instructions. But if it were not guilty on those core charges that to me seem like we're clearly established, some transportation and other kind of issues there that involve those other counts, if those were not guilty and they were unanimous on that, then I think the RICO just is immediately, they would say, of course, the RICO is not guilty, because the RICO requires, as you know, is these predicate acts, and the ones that we were looking at in those other contexts were the significant issues that were driving the entire case. So if it was not guilty on the trafficking and transportation charges, I would think they would have no problem coming to a consensus on RICO. The other way makes a lot more sense to me, that they're saying, yeah, he did some bad stuff to these victims and we're going to convict him of that. We're unanimous on that, but the RICO is a bridge too far for some of the jurors to go on. And personally, I always thought it was an extreme overcharge, even though technically there was evidence to support a RICO conviction. It just seemed like he's an enterprise of one guy, and it just doesn't fit him, in my view.
Do these charges, like racketeering, that's going to be helpful if they're going to go after some of these other people, I would imagine, KK and et cetera, et cetera. Is that maybe part, or do you think the government, is there a version of this where, like, you know what, fine, we'll take the 4 out of 5? What will there be any negotiation or lack, or do you think they're going to hold their guns and try to hope that the jury isn't hung on count 1?
Well, so we may see this Allen charge, basically the judge.
Sorry, can you explain? Yeah, people were asking, what is an Allen charge?
Sure. So when the jury comes back saying they're deadlocked, meaning they cannot come up with a unanimous verdict, so it has to be unanimous in a criminal case in the U.S. So when they come back and say, look, we just don't have a unanimous verdict on one or more charges, the judge will sometimes say, go back and try again. They'll say, hey, do you have any questions I can answer? They'll answer it. But sometimes they'll do this thing called a dynamite charge, which is really, some view as coercive, telling the jury, look, this is unacceptable. You have spent all this time. You need to come up with a decision. It needs to be unanimous. Stop screwing around in kind of legal language. And so that's what I think the prosecutor is seeking, and hoping that, again, it's dynamite, blow up the 1 or 2 holdout jurors, and to say, hey, maybe it's 10 that are saying guilty and 2 that are saying not guilty on the RICO, and have the judge give this dynamite charge, which might coerce those 2 holdout jurors to changing to guilty. That's why Diddy's team, kind of reading the wind here, doesn't want the dynamite exploding, because would much rather have a deadlocked or a hung jury on RICO, because the prosecutor is really unlikely, in my view, to retry him on the RICO charge, and that means he just now gets convicted of these other ones. So that's what the Allen charge is about, what they're fighting over.
Gotcha. Okay, so just so people have an update, because there was a couple updates that came in, and going back, they received a note at 4:05 today. We've reached a verdict on 2, 3, 4, and 5. We've been unable to reach a verdict on 1, as we have jurors on each side. So they talked about this Allen charge, which Chris just explained. Blah, 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 blah. Combs was not looking happy. That was the other sort of summary here. They received some proposals back and forth, figuring it out. And then they were debating about, well, so can we tell them Thursday? They could stay till Thursday on the 3rd. We could arrange that. We'd like to give them the option to deliberate on the 3rd. And then they said, well, we don't want to tell them that now, because then they might feel rushed to reach it by Thursday. Let's just have them deliberate tomorrow. You could ask them at the end of the day tomorrow. And then the defense would have no objection to them deliberating on the 3rd. No objection if they want to. Okay, let's bring them out. They brought the jury out. All rise. Welcome back. I received your note that you've reached verdicts on 2 through 5. I ask you to continue deliberating, discuss and weigh your respective opinions dispassionately, and follow my instructions on the law. I ask you return to the jury room. If you decide you are done for the day, send me another note and I'll bring you back out to end the day. Jurors leave. Everyone can now go back to what they were doing. So what do you think is going to happen here, Chris, from your experience? Do you think they're going to hold out and we're not going to know tonight? Do you think they're just going to try to bring them back tomorrow?
There has been an update. Sorry to interrupt. There has been an update, yes.
Okay. Our preference is that you don't... sorry. Break
So
where? Oh, we have
keep
received a
going down.
note. Jurors have concluded for today and will resume tomorrow. Oh, there you go. They answered the question
Yeah.
for me. We'll bring them back. All rise. Very briefly, thank you tomorrow. Go directly to the jury room. Keep an open mind. Do not watch or read anything about the case. Okay, well, there it was. I was going to ask, do you think they would come up with a verdict today? But it sounds like we won't get the verdict today. So this is your video. So Chris, are you surprised by that? Does that change your opinion at all? I mean, it sounds like they're taking this seriously is what I see this as. They're not rushing to a verdict, which actually I think is a good thing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it sounds like the judge didn't give the Allen charge, just saying, hey, continue deliberating is different than the dynamite, basically saying, hey, go back and do this right. Sometimes a judge will pull. I don't know the procedure in that particular courthouse, but some judges will pull the jury to saying, how split are you? Is this 11-1, or 6-6? And that tells a lot. Do we have one holdout, or if we're 6-6, we could be here 2 weeks. That ain't going to change. But maybe if it's one, maybe two people, they could be twisted into agreeing. And so, that's the judge didn't do that. He's being very cautious because, again, you need to protect the rights of the defendant and can't just coerce these jurors into saying, hey, come on, this is unfinished business. You need to make a verdict, and we could see potentially how that could turn out to saying, okay, fine, I'll just guilty on RICO. So that's why the defense was objecting to that.
Makes sense. So how long do you, it sounds like they're close. How long does the government wait? Do you let them come back after the holiday if they're still unsure? Like what's typically enough time to say they've, fought it out and they can't come up with a decision?
So my sense is they'll come back tomorrow. They will have slept on it. They're going to give a note to they'll probably take another vote, internally there in the jury room tomorrow morning. They'll, if no one's changed their mind after a good night's sleep, they will just send a note to the judge saying, "Hey, we haven't changed." And at that point, the judge may pull, and saying how far apart is it, one holdout or is it six holdouts? He might give the dynamite. It might say come back later. But my sense is with this judge being so cautious at that point, saying, "Hey, you came up with your vote on." Whatever it is, Tuesday, you've come back Wednesday and you're feeling the same way, probably just go ahead and take the verdict and be a hung jury on count one and take whatever the guilty or not guilty verdict on counts 2 through 5.
And how's that affect future people if they want to go after this racketeering case? Is that going to help? I assume that's not good for the government if they want to get conspirators, no?
Well, I mean, every case is going to stand on its own. So even if Diddy's convicted here, that can't be used as evidence to, like say KK. She gets her own trial based on their own evidence. And I think, Kim, you were kind of correct in pointing out earlier about, maybe they didn't grant immunity to her as they did to other witnesses because they want to hold something special for her, which is her own case. But hey, if there is evidence there that can be brought against her directly, then there she goes and all on her own. And Diddy at that point wouldn't really necessarily come to her rescue because he would have already been convicted if that's the outcome of it. Had they charged her contemporaneous with him or in the same case, he might have funded her a little bit more because they, all go down together. So yeah, she could be hanging out on her own along with one or two other people.
Makes sense.
So
completely.
there we go. A lot to wait for. Tomorrow's the big day. We will be here making sure we cover it for you. Appreciate you, Chris. If you're watching, here's the important thing. Click that bell for all alerts so you get notified when this verdict comes in. Could be a little bit, could be a lot. Make sure you click it though. Click that like, leave your comments down below, and stay tuned. We will keep you updated. We got a lot more to talk about, so don't go anywhere. Appreciate all you guys watching, and make sure you also subscribe to It's Kim and follow Christopher Melcher at CA_divorce on Twitter.